You're listening to the weekly parsha podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel, 5777, 2017. This week's parsha is Parshas Chukas. I'd like to remind you about my sefer, Perfectly Imperfect, breaking out of the ordinary and striving for greatness, available right now wherever excellent Jewish books are sold. It's a book about personal growth. It's a book about becoming great ourselves and our relationships with others, encouraging others to become great. I also want to mention what I said last week, which is that we are coming now to 10 full years that I have been giving these parsha podcasts every single week, Bezrat Hashem, with Hashem's help. So that's a great celebration, and you are welcome to join me in that celebration. If you have a dedication that you'd like to make, a podcast, whatever, you can go on my website. You can find the donate button on the Buy Now page of arigoldwag.com. Now, when we look at our parsha this week in Parshas Chukas, so we have one of perhaps the most challenging issues that we need to understand, which is the punishment of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. He was the redeemer of the Jewish people. He was sent by Hashem in order to bring the Jewish people out of Egypt and bring them to the land of Israel. They spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness as a result of their sin. In last week's parsha, with Meraglim, with the spies. And in this week's parsha, we find that even though really Moshe should have led the Jewish people into the land of Israel, he was not allowed to do so because of the sin that was committed. Instead of speaking to the stone, which was to bring forth water to provide that sustenance for the Jewish people, instead of speaking as Hashem instructed him to, he struck the stone with his staff, which is indeed something that he had done in the past. In the beginning of their time in the wilderness, so that stone began to provide them with water. He struck it. Indeed, he was instructed to do so. And then in our parsha, so we find that we had the death of Miriam, the death of Aaron, and because Miriam, it was her schus, it was her merit that caused the well to exist, which provided water for all of the Jewish people. She passed away, that merit went away. So it had to be brought back. And in our story, that's what happened. But it came back in a way which created an opportunity for a sin which Moshe Rabbeinu committed, which was he had an opportunity, lahakdisheni, Hashem says. You could have caused a great sanctification of my name by showing that it was enough to speak to the rock. But instead, he did not use that opportunity to speak. Instead, he hit the rock. And the result was that there was a lack of Kiddush Hashem. There was a lack of a sanctification of God's name. And so Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel. And our sages tell us that if Moshe would have led the Jewish people into Israel, if indeed he would have come in, he would have built the temple, he would have built the Beis HaMikdash, and that Beis HaMikdash would never have been destroyed. So we would not have had our years of Galus, not the 70 years between the first and second temple, not the last 1900 years that we were in Galus without our land. We would have indeed remained in Israel all of this time. The Jewish people would have been the center, the leaders of mankind. Jerusalem would have been the capital of the entire world, the spiritual capital of the world, as it shall be in the future. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Why? Because of this sin. And I'd like to share with you some ideas based on what Reb Chaim Friedlander speaks about, how he understands it. But one of the things that he points out is that Moshe Rabbeinu was acting as a shliach. He was acting as an agent on behalf of the Jewish people. So when he sinned, when there was something that he did wrong, it was representative of the fact that there was something in the relationship of the Jewish people to Hashem that was missing, which resulted in their great leader doing something which was negative and not being able to lead them into the land of Israel. So it's an interplay here between Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the Jewish people, their relationship with Hashem, as it's reflected in what Moshe Rabbeinu does. And so we need to understand what exactly was it? What was so bad? The fact that he hit the rock. Why should he have spoken to the rock? What is the difference between striking the rock and speaking to the rock? And what does it say about our relationship with Hashem? And how does that reflect in other aspects of our relationship with Hashem till this very day? And also importantly, how will this change when we indeed soon, God willing, we soon reach that point in history, which is called Yemei Moshiach, the days of the Messiah, the Messianic age. When we indeed have a Beis HaMikdash, we have a temple, exactly what Moshe should have done will finally be done. We will finally have Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, will be ours without anyone trying to fight us for it. Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, there will be a Beis HaMikdash there. The entire land of Israel, undisputed, will belong to the Jewish people. The borders will even extend beyond what's presently the land of Israel. So what are we to expect? What will things look like? What will our relationship with Hashem look like? What will the Torah look like? The teachings of the Torah? How will our approach to Torah be different when Moshiach comes, when the Messiah arrives? What's very interesting in trying to understand this, just before we get into what Reb Chaim Friedlander says, it's important to understand that when we speak about water, we speak about water as the sustenance of the human being, the essence of what he needs in order to survive. A person can go for days or even longer without food, but to go without water is so essential that even a short amount of time without water, the person could, heaven forbid, pass from this world. So water is the essence of the human life. And interestingly and beautifully, our Chazal, our sages, when they speak about the Torah, when they speak about the idea of the embodiment of Hashem's instructions to us, the relationship that we have with Him, and how that manifests itself, and how we express it, and we study, we try to understand it, that's the Torah. The Torah is nimshalo kemayim. The Torah is analogous to water. Because in a similar way, when we have Torah, we have the essence of our relationship with Hashem. That is what sustains us spiritually. We can't exist in this world on a spiritual level without Torah, without these instructions for life. And really, truly, we can't exist even on a physical level without that, because all we become is just like an animal. We become just like, just fighting for survival here. So the depth of the idea, the beautiful idea, the analogy that our sages give us is that Torah is analogous to water. And so when we speak about the Be'er, when we speak about this well, which beautifully, by the way, at the end of our parsha, it's so beautiful, there was a special song that the Jewish people sang as they would watch the water come up, the water from this well. So the song of the Torah, it's really a song of essence, of life force that's being sung there. And so when we speak about what's going on with Moshe Rabbeinu and this rock, we need to understand that it's not just about the water. It is also about the water, of course. We have to understand it on a simple level. But there's also a deeper level, which is the parallel to Torah and our access to our relationship with Hashem and the sustenance which we are to see comes directly from Hashem, directly from God. So now with that understanding, that introduction, we can understand what the beginning of what Reb Chaim Friedlander speaks about in Sifsei Chaim, in our parsha. He speaks about the fact that when we look at the way we have access to Torah, when we look at the way that a person needs to approach Torah and approach understanding of Torah, so generally there's a concept, he lays it out at the beginning. Lefum tzara agra, we know that according to how much effort a person puts in, according to the difficulty, the challenge, that's the result, the reward, so to speak. The spiritual result of what's done is always corresponds precisely to the amount of difficulty, the challenge that was involved. And so when it comes to learning Torah, there's a concept of yagati, that I have to put in effort, I have to strive, I have to work hard, I have to break off the shells. The Torah that we have, whether it's a medrash, whether it's a gemara, whether it's a pasuk, all of these teachings, they come with a shell. They come with something that blocks us from understanding it. We have to put in effort in order to understand it. It's difficult, it's challenging. But as he points out, the way that it completes, when we get to that point of understanding, it's yagati umatsasi. There's an effort that has to be put in. It's challenging, it's hard, and then at the end we find something. It's something that we receive as a gift from God. And he points out that in this stage, when we're in the stage of trying to crack through that shell, working hard to try to understand what's going on, so there's a certain hitnagdut, there's a certain resistance that we experience as we try to break through and get to the understanding of Torah, to the understanding of what our relationship with Hashem is meant to look like. Every week, when I work on this parsha podcast, I spend hours working on it to try to develop an idea, to try to find something that I find interesting, something that I hope you will find interesting. But it's an effort. Sometimes I get to the point where I'm like, I can't find anything. I can't find something that's interesting to me, that's exciting to me. And so it's hard. It's a challenge. It's a great challenge. But I have a commitment, so I keep coming back. And I've been doing this now, as I mentioned, for 10 years. Next week it will be 10 years. But this is a daunting task. It's a challenge. It's difficult. And so, but what that presents to us is that how it is that Hashem wants us? Does Hashem want us that the Torah should be difficult, that it should be a challenge, should be something that, our heart isn't all the way into because it's so hard, it's so difficult? So Reb Chaim Friedlander points out that there's a deeper level when it comes to our learning of Torah. And that deeper level is the level of Ahava, which is love, which is where we learn the Torah. We try to access the understanding of what our relationship with Hashem looks like. We do that out of love. And that's a deeper level. And of course, when a person does something out of love, you can't compare the type of learning that's done when a person is excited and loves a topic or loves a subject, whatever it is. That type of learning is going to be much deeper. It's going to go much deeper into the psyche of the human being when it's done out of love, as opposed to when it's being done even because it's the right thing, even because it's what a person knows should be done. The type of learning that comes out of love goes much more into a person. It has a much deeper and more profound effect on the person. So clearly, Ahava, serving Hashem out of love, learning the Torah out of love, that's the level that we're looking for, we're striving for, that we're trying to get to. Okay, but amazingly, it's very interesting. In this world, in the way that it is now, because perhaps, as we'll see, of this Avera that Moshe Rabbeinu did on his great exalted level, because the one who teaches Torah, the one who draws forth the waters of sustenance to the Jewish people, instead of doing it by speaking, which is an aspect of love, he did it with striking, with a mateh, with his staff, striking the stone, bringing it forth with judgment instead of with love. So the result is that we have to face off always with the challenge of doing it first through judgment, first through this challenging way. It has to be struck in a certain sense, but ultimately the place that we are going for, which was the ideal place, is the place of love. So you always have to have both of these levels. As he says, these two levels are interlocked, they're intertwined. We have Yira and we have Ahava. We have this is represented by two different psukim that David HaMelech, King David says. One pasuk is, Ivdu es Hashem b'yira, v'gilu bera'adu, the verse says. Serve Hashem with fear or awe and rejoice in trembling. So there has to be this awe as we come into a relationship with Hashem. We have to break through those klipos. We have to break through the shell which covers the fruit which is inside. But there's another pasuk, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. The Torah tells us we are to serve Hashem with joy. So there's the aspect of love, which is essential. And what is the resolution of the contradiction between these two psukim? Are we to serve Hashem with yira, with fear? Are we to serve Hashem with joy, with love? And the answer is that they're both true. We need both. And the way that things are set up right now is that the first place, the entrance fee, so to speak, the way to get in from the beginning is through yira. We have to start with a seriousness, with a yira, with an awe of Hashem. We have to come in and we have to break through the barriers. But when we break through those barriers and we get inside, so we find this delicious sweet fruit, we find the simcha, the joy, we find the ahava, the love. Now there's one more point here which is important, which we already mentioned in passing, but it's important to understand this. I'm going to reiterate it and expand a little bit upon it. And that is what Reb Chaim Friedlander says, that when it comes to the level of yira, when it comes to the level of awe, or fear of Hashem, doing things because we know it's the right thing to do, not per se because we have a love and a chukas desire for it. So that level is something, as Chazal say, Hakol b'yedei shamayim chutz miyiras shamayim, that it's something which everything, generally speaking, is in the hands of heaven, except for yiras shamayim. When it comes to the fear of heaven, when it comes to doing things out of yira, when it comes to breaking through those barriers, that's something that at a certain level, of course, we always need siyata d'shmaya, we always need help from Hashem, but that's something that we have to break through on our own. We have to have that determination and willingness to break through the challenge on our own. But when it comes to the level of Ahava, it's an amazing thing. When it comes to doing something out of love for Hashem, so that's not something that we have charge over. It's not something that's in our hands. Hakol b'yedei shamayim. Everything really is in Hashem's hands except for the beginning. The beginning is ours, so to speak. The results, the love, which is that which comes at the end of the efforts, the love for the Torah, the love for mitzvahs, the love for fulfilling the commandments and understanding God's will, that's something that comes as a result of our efforts, yes, but not because of our efforts. It's something which is a gift. As we said, Yogati umatsasi. A person has to put in the efforts, but when he completes it, the results he finds is something that Hashem gives him as a gift. So we need to know that when it comes to serving Hashem out of Ahava, that's something that we need to want. That's how the Reb Chaim Friedlander talks about it. It's something that we need to have a chuka for. We need to want to serve Hashem out of love. But it's not something that we can really say, I'm doing it out of love. It's something that results because of our efforts. This reminds me of something which I just recently heard on a tape, on an audio MP3 from my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Per. And that is, it's known, if you are a parent, you know this, that when it comes to love, when it comes to loving one's child, so it's more natural for a woman, the mother, to love the child. She went through all kinds of pain for the child. She nurses the child, etc. She takes care of the children. Where is it, said Rosh Yeshiva, that a father develops love for the child? And he said, it's when the father changes the child's diaper. When I invest in that child, when I do something which isn't so pleasant, it's not so fun to change the diaper of a child. But when the father does that, so he has now broken through. There's like something difficult or challenging that he has done. There's the shell of that nut which has been cracked. And what the father finds on the other end is love. The love is the result. It's a gift. It happens naturally. Love is not something that you can just have. It's something that happens as a result of efforts that are put in, but it's something that's received as a gift. It's not something that one actually gets because you wanted to love. You can't just want to love. You can't just love. There has to be an action that produces love. Love is a result. Love is a gift. Now I'd like to draw you back to Moshe Rabbeinu and try to understand what happened. What was the sin? How did it result? How did it come about? And what was the result, as we spoke about, and what's going to be different when Moshiach comes? So the first thing is, as we started to speak about, the fact that when Moshe Rabbeinu originally struck the rock at the beginning of their time in the Midbar, at the beginning of the time in the wilderness, so that striking of the rock represented the fact that when it comes to a relationship with Hashem, when it comes to getting sustenance from Hashem, whether it's literal physical sustenance or spiritual sustenance, so the first step that needs to be taken is one of Yira. We have to break through. It has to be struck, so to speak. But now, when Hashem instructed Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of the time in the wilderness, now I want you to speak to the rock. What Hashem was really saying was that the Jewish people are now entering into a different level in their relationship with Hashem. It's not just about Yira. This is a deeper level. It's a level of Ahava. When I speak to somebody instead of striking them, if I talk to my child, and in order to get them to do what I want them to do, I have to punish them, so that's not a level of love. That's Yira. Now, if I can speak to my child and say to them, please do this thing, and I ask them nicely, and they respond, so then I have developed a certain level in my relationship with my child. That's called love. That's the result, perhaps, of starting off with the challenges and facing off with the challenges, etc., getting through that. We get to a place of love. My child now does it out of love, and that's speech. So speech represents love, and Hashem was instructing Moshe Rabbeinu, you should speak now to the rock. The level of my relationship with the Jewish people now is one of love. Now, why did Moshe Rabbeinu not speak to the rock? Why did he strike the rock in this case? So Reb Chaim Friedlander explains that there was something fundamental which Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake about. And that was that he saw that the Jewish people did not seem to be on the level. They were rebelling against God. When they came with their complaint, which was a legitimate complaint, that there was no water. So they didn't come with that complaint in a proper way, in a respectful way. They came with a complaint in a very disrespectful way, with a challenge against God, with a challenge against Moshe Rabbeinu. And so Moshe Rabbeinu felt that because of their rebellion, because of their approach, because of the negative way that they approached him and Hashem, so it wasn't appropriate at this time for Hashem to express love at this moment. It wasn't appropriate for Hashem to give them the water in a way which was loving, but rather Hashem held Moshe Rabbeinu. What Moshe Rabbeinu thought, Hashem should give it to them in a judgmental way. Now, the mistake of Moshe was that Hashem's love is so deep, His chesed is so deep, that even when the child, like a parent, even when the parent is looking at their child, the child is acting up. But how deep is the love of the parent? The parent is willing to have the patience and the love for the child, to give that child what the child needs, even in a loving way, and not respond to that child in a judgmental way. It's possible. And at this point, Hashem was instructing Moshe, and Moshe made the mistake to misunderstand what was to be done here. But Hashem was instructing Moshe, yes, it's possible that even when they're in a place which is incorrect, which is not kefi kvodam, or not kefi kvodi, they're in a place which is not appropriate for them, not appropriate for their relationship with me, but I still can behave with them with love, with chesed, with kindness. I can still speak to them. And as we said before, if Moshe Rabbeinu had spoken to the rock, so then the Jewish people would have had Moshe Rabbeinu to lead them into Israel. And they would have had a Beis HaMikdash, which would never have been destroyed. Also important is that he points out, he brings from the Zohar, that this parallels the way that we receive the Torah. If Moshe Rabbeinu would have spoken to the rock instead of striking the rock, so whereas the rock produced water only at first in drops, it didn't just flow out. It only flowed out after he struck it. So that's how we approach Torah as well. We have to strike the rock. We have to break through when it comes to learning Torah. But it should have been, and it will be in the future when Moshiach comes, that the way that we receive Torah, the way that we have access to our relationship with Hashem, is one of automatic flowing, of automatic love. And we will not have to break through any kind of klipos, any kind of outer shells that need to be broken through. We will access Hashem's love without that first stage of yira, of fear. But the bottom line of what we see here is that the way that the world exists now, at least until Moshiach comes, until the Messiah arrives, is that in order to have a true relationship with Hashem, we need to get through these two layers, these two levels. First is yira, then is ahava. First is that fear, then is the love, and of course, the love is something which we only receive as a gift. So I want to bless you, and please bless me. Hashem should help us to understand the depth of this idea, to recognize that yes, we live in a world of challenge. Yes, we live in a world where having a true relationship with Hashem is not easy, and it requires breaking through the barriers. Hashem should help us to indeed have the wherewithal, have the willingness to break through those barriers, and Hashem should give us that gift which comes on the other side, which is Ahava, which is love. And Hashem should bring us that we should be able to see that time, we should be able to exist in that realm where it's completely Ahava, it's all love, and it's all a gift. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.